really think about what you can and cannot control and focus in on the areas that you feel you can have the greatest impact.
Welcome to Agency for Change, a podcast from KidGlov that brings you the stories of change makers who are actively working to improve our communities. In every episode, we'll meet with people who are making a lasting impact in the places we call home.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Agency for Change podcast. This is Lynn Weinman, President and Chief Strategist at KidGlov. So today's guest knows how to turn bold ideas into real-world impact. Amanda McGill Johnson is a former state senator, a local education leader, a children's book author, and now the executive director of Nebraska Cures, where she is championing scientific research, mental health policy, and women in STEM. And she's not just working for change, I'm going to say she's leading it right here in Nebraska. Amanda, welcome to the podcast.
Oh, I'm so happy to be here, Lynn. Thanks for having me.
Oh, Amanda, I'm so glad to talk to you. You and I have known each other for a bit. We've interacted in different ways over the years. I always love talking with you. And today we're going to talk about Nebraska Cures in particular. Can you just start by telling us about the organization?
Yeah, Nebraska Cures has the mission to promote, support, and advocate for health research and education for the betterment of our health and also our economy. And so we work in a couple of different ways to educate policy members and the public kind of in a grassroots way about the importance of medical research and science in general. We have three sort of public health areas of focus, being mental health, maternal child health, and the environment and health. And then we also work on career pathways in science. And the biggest piece of that is our Nebraska Women in STEM partnership.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And we're going to talk a bit more about women in STEM coming up here. But Amanda, from your perspective, what makes Nebraska-based medical research especially important?
Well, the way that a lot of basic scientific research is done is through grants from the federal government. But we try to really focus in on the grants and the funding that are received here in Nebraska and the positive impact of our Nebraska researchers.
Yeah.
Not only are they making discoveries that will help people around the world, right?
Yeah.
And have that expertise. But it also is an economic driver for our state. I mean, when you think about all the jobs in those areas, and they're really good paying jobs, solid
Absolutely.
jobs, that investing in medical research is important for an economy as well. And that even we're more focused on biomedical research, but there's research happening in agriculture and in other areas that are important ultimately for our health as well.
You know, I think, Amanda, that when people think of the state of Nebraska, medical research probably isn't one of the first things that comes to mind, right? But yet there's a lot happening here.
You know, I think there's a lot of pride in UNMC and a global recognition of the global impact they have had. I mean, we saw it during the pandemic with their biohazard units and such. But I mean, UNMC really is a gem in the entire region. But they're not the only ones who are doing research in that area. UNL does a lot.
Yeah.
Really all of the campuses in the system. But so do Creighton and Boys Town National Research Hospital. They're all getting grants from the NIH, federally, to do really important work in a spectrum of different issues.
Absolutely.
I mean, there are enough health problems out there that you need lots of institutions focusing on different things, if you really make advancements in them.
I love that. And Amanda, a lot of our listeners will know NIH, but tell us more.
National Institutes of Health.
All right. Fantastic. All right. So since you mentioned grants, there's a lot going on right now related to funding and so forth. Can you give us a little primer on what's happening?
For sure. We've really honestly had to pivot into that core of our mission in the last few months because Sadly, biomedical research funding has been threatened at the state and especially the federal level. So Nebraska is really unique that we, in a state budget, allocate $15 million to biomedical research. And we were able to protect the proposed cuts to that $15 million
great.
in our state government. So that's great. The legislature just passed the budget. So that $15 million is there. And that goes to those entities I talked about, the University of Nebraska system, Creighton and Boys Town. But at the federal level, that's where the bulk of the money comes from. And that there were moves earlier this year to take what are called indirect costs related to medical research and how those are funded and change them. And that's held up in courts. But the big threat right now, the emphasis is on what will the budget look like for next year for the National Institutes of Health, CDC, for the National Science Foundation. Nebraska gets $137 million from the NIH alone for medical research, and the proposal from the president is cutting NIH funding by 40%.
Oh, wow. That's just devastating, right?
It is devastating to fundamental science. And then, of course, there are proposed cuts to the CDC and the National Science Foundation, which we get $50 million for the National Science Foundation and other types of research in science here in our state. And so these cuts would have not just an impact on scientific discovery, but it's the jobs that go along with that as well. So it really is a two-fisted punch.
Absolutely. Wow. Because you think about it, Amanda, I mean, just to make this real, this is research that's going towards all the things that are important to us. Alzheimer's, dementia, mental health, cancer, diseases, which like the pandemic, things that have come up that we never thought would happen in our lifetime.
It is shocking. We were honestly unprepared for this level of really assault on scientific funding. And it's especially surprising when you look at polling about how popular supporting biomedical research is. Just in January, before the administration changed, an organization, a national one called Research America, they do an annual poll of people's perceptions of science and advocacy around that, and lawmakers, trusted sources of information. And, of Republicans, 60% of Republicans say they would give an extra $1 a week to the federal government in taxes if they knew it would go to medical research.
Wow.
And so among independents and Democrats, that's like...
It's even higher, right? Yeah.
And so it's just so surprising that this is one of the things that's been under fire in the budget as they're trying to, pivot or spend that money in different ways. So like I said, we've had to refocus our efforts on, because we've been really working on mental health and policy in that area. And we can talk about that in a little bit if you'd like.
Absolutely.
But we've had to put time back into that. This is why this investment is important. And we've even developed a page on our website under our priorities that's just going to highlight the research happening here in Nebraska and why this is an important thing to be developing.
Absolutely. Well, let's tackle the policy angle of this, because I know a lot of what you do is in that policy and advocacy space. Can you talk to us about what that looks like?
Yeah, we are a small organization. And so I do have to constantly tell myself, where can we have the biggest impact?
Absolutely.
And it really is in building up that basic information to do grassroots advocacy and some direct advocacy. We have been largely focused at our state house. And so we're used to going down to Lincoln and talking to state senators and activating our followers and supporters to reach out to their state senators. And hopefully that's part of how we were able to keep that state funding for biomedical research. Having to pivot and look more at the federal level and the even larger threats there, it's a little more overwhelming, thinking about how you can make an impact when there is kind of this onslaught of cuts across the board, not just to research, right? And how to elevate this particular, what I see is nonpartisan issue in supporting biomedical research.
Absolutely. It's got to feel a little bit at times right now, like you've got arrows coming at you from all different directions, right?
Ways. So I'm happy that the state legislature here in Nebraska maintained their funding. but still trying to figure out how to, like, what partners at the national level. We're members of Research America. So, working with them, and also trying to activate, supporters to reach out to members of Congress about how these cuts really just do not make sense. Some people think, oh, you're funding research, and you think it's just going into this nebulous, I don't know, equipment, or I don't know.
Yeah, right. It does. Sometimes you say the word research or science or medical, and it's hard to connect the dots. Like, what does that actually mean when we cut that money or when we fund it? So I think you making it real for us, it's people and health
that are making a difference for a lot of people in the long run. But research is also slow.
Yeah.
And it does take a long-term investment to come up with cures and major discoveries. They don't happen overnight. And there has been, in the last couple of years, maybe the last decade, a greater level of federal investment in research. Like the NIH's budget did go up dramatically. I could even understand leveling that off, a little bit of a cut or something, because it has grown so much, because you do have to be mindful of budgets. There's only so much.
Absolutely right.
But 40%
is huge.
It is devastating.
Yeah. So, Amanda, when I think about you in this role as the executive director of Nebraska Cures and all the things that you do as a small team, actually a small team of one, I think, mostly.
And we have a lobbyist that focuses on state.
All right. But I can't think of a person that's more perfectly prepared for this role than you, right? Can you tell us a little bit, how did you get into this position? What has your path been like?
Yeah. So for those especially may not be in Nebraska, but even a lot of Nebraskans may not know that I'm a former state senator.
Yeah.
So I was elected in 2006 and served for 2 terms until I was term limited out. I then spent a year and a half as the district director for Congressman Brad Ashford in the Omaha area. So I was in Lincoln when I was a state senator, moved back home to Omaha and served for Congressman Ashford. I'm currently on a school board in Omaha, in the Millard Public Schools district. So I have a long history of public service in a broad swath of different roles.
Yeah.
I guess
I'm going to say thank you for that, because I can't imagine what it would be like to submit yourself to an election and then be in public service where you work so hard for so little, if any, compensation at all. And everybody feels empowered to comment on every little thing that you do.
It's true. But it's gotten worse. Not so much like at a school level for me in my district. I know some school boards maybe have become more divisive in their communities, but I live in a very supportive community of our schools and a diverse board. But social media has really changed how you're an elected official, I think, in 2 ways. One, people feel they can say anything to you in any way and feel really emboldened and empowered to do that. Like, I see things that are sent to current state senators and the language used.
It's amazing and shocking.
Maybe I got one that was that bad. I can only think of 1 or 2 emails that I got as a legislator that were like, I should tell the state patrol about this, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And now I think people are just more emboldened to say anything and be nastier. But I also think elected officials can get more caught up in the public perception and what they're sharing on social media really, like, be about how they're trying to communicate with members, instead of maybe just behind the scenes trying to work things out in a way. It's just changed the landscape on both as a constituents and how they communicate, but also elected officials and how some choose to use that, and personalities that also emerge in the social media world.
Like so many communications medium, it has its great aspects, but people always find a way, right, to maybe use it in a negative or inappropriate way too. And I think that's too bad. I think that it might prevent some really smart and resourceful people from wanting to serve in public office. Yeah.
When you look at a state legislature where, in Nebraska, they make $12,000 a year plus some, expenses, maybe at most it's 15 or 16,000,
It's a lot of trouble for that, right?
Yeah.
So
It's
I
very
so appreciate anybody who serves in elected position in any level because it's a lot. It's a
yeah. And
lot.
there are levels like school board that don't pay anything,
Yeah,
it's
right.
for a volunteer job.
Right.
And so it can be a lot, but most people who do it, regardless of party affiliation, do it because they care.
Yeah.
They just may have different views on how to get there or the economics or business of it.
Yeah.
But I do believe, and I think that's important for everyone to remember, that the people who choose to run are largely doing it, especially in local races, are doing it because they care about their community.
Amanda, that is a really great point. And while people are thinking on that point in particular, I want to take a little break here and I want to share something that I am really excited about at the moment. It is our new book called Untangling Spaghetti, a Branding Fable. And I wrote it for nonprofit and purpose-driven leaders who feel like they're spinning their wheels when it comes to branding and messaging. So if you're really looking for the right way to communicate about your impact, this is a fun and story-based read with real tools and insights woven throughout. And I am thrilled to say that it's now an Amazon bestseller. So you can find it on Amazon by searching for Untangling Spaghetti, a Branding Fable, or you can go to kidglov.com/untangling spaghetti. One of the issues you're really working on is mental health policy. And it just seems like since the pandemic, mental health has become more in the spotlight, more of an issue. I think people are more willing to talk about it, which I think is a really great thing. But can you talk a little bit more about those efforts?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you're right. The pandemic, if anything, and I hadn't really thought about this till just now and you saying it, I feel
Yeah.
like there has been quite an effort around opioid addiction and that little
Yeah.
piece of the mental health addiction pie. But post pandemic, it is more about isolation and anxiety and all the other, parts of a mentally healthy community.
Yeah.
So grateful for the opportunity to talk about that. What we're trying to build in Nebraska, myself, so Nebraska Cures and NAMI Nebraska we're kind of tasked with trying to build a coalition around mental health policy because there's a lot of good work being done in groups. Like there's an association of providers here in Nebraska that have done a great job championing Medicaid rates. And then you have school psychiatrists and some of the psychologists and the work that they're doing, and some focus on kids' mental health. But it's all fragmented. It's not under one umbrella. It's not looking holistically at all the different parts and what should we prioritize or where can we build partnerships. So last fall, we had our first ever mental health policy convening in October, where we brought together over 100 stakeholders to start prioritizing
Wow.
issues.
Yeah.
And at the same time, launched a Nebraska mental health study that's currently underway and will be available towards the end of the summer, early fall. We'll do a follow-up convening October 1st in Lincoln, where we will start to take action steps based around what the findings of this report are. And a lot of the things won't be surprising, in the gaps.
Right.
With my research hat on is that we need more research into mental health so we can find better interventions and medical treatments. And
Right.
there's some people that are treatment resistant is maybe one of the words.
Yeah. That's a very nice way to say it. But I think treatment resistant, right? I think part of the issue of mental health is you maybe aren't seeing things, in the most healthy way possible, right? And so you're not seeking help for the issue. Yeah.
Yeah. So the stigma against it, and that's a piece of it. And then even for, there are more and more medications to help with different aspects of mental health or addiction, but it's based on your personal biology.
Right.
And there are people that our current medications aren't as effective for, or the side effects are really bad. And so we need more of the research as one piece of, all the we access and more workforce, all those other things too that people traditionally think about. But anyway, this study will help shed light on areas of improvement and recommendations. And then we will start building out, what comes next from those recommendations
Yeah.
and build that broad policy umbrella that all the stakeholders can be a part of. That will also probably still mean there are people focused on kids and mental health.
Right.
Criminal justice system and mental health, but have them all also know what's going on with each other.
Right. Kind of rowing in the same direction, working towards the same goal for the state. I think that's really, really amazing. I also know, Amanda, one of your big initiatives that I love is Women in STEM, and you're coming up on 3 years with that program.
Yeah,
Tell me more about, and I see the big, for people who can't see you because this is a podcast, I see the big smile on your face when we talk about this program. So tell us more.
Brings me joy. So we started this coming out of the pandemic. It's Nebraska Cures and Nebraska. We're all about partnerships, right?
I love it. Partnerships are great. There's not, especially right now, there's not enough resources to duplicate efforts.
Yeah. Yes. And then we have some people who think Nebraska Women in STEM is its own 501c3. And no, it's a partnership. We both need resources to make it run, staff time. So this is something that we started also coming out of that pandemic period where we were seeing films like there's a film called Picture a Scientist that looks at academia and how women drop out of the pipeline. Like we're doing a better job, especially in the sciences, of more women getting undergraduate degrees in science. But when you work up to PhD, they start dropping out. It makes a case of why we need to help support that professional level of women.
Yeah.
And when I met with Nebraska about this, we said, let's make it all women in STEM. We invested in a study done by UNO Center for Public Affairs Research. They interviewed 49 women in STEM from across the state about the barriers and also what worked for them. They developed recommendations, and professional development and networking advocacy were three of the 6 recommendations. And so we started an annual conference, just did our 3rd one. We have a celebration and luncheon. We do webinars. We have an academia summit coming up that's all virtual. Just a variety of different pieces of programming to build community and professional development in a way that isn't like specific to engineering or technology or science. Some of those groups exist, but this is supporting all women in STEM and some of those soft skills, imposter syndrome, communication skills.
Yes.
Really are valued. All of them, all of these women who are super smart.
Yes.
But you need some of those additional tools to help them succeed. And in a time when like a lot of those funding cuts we talked about are impacting these women, having the community around them. Like at our conference, people were like, I needed this.
Yeah. Yeah. So much we talked about social media, and to bring it full circle. I mean, I remember when you were having that most recent conference, I was seeing so much great social media from people who participated, speakers. Like I could just feel the virtual energy coming off of the conference, which I think is a good thing.
You acknowledge that life is hard, and it is. Even in the best of times, life can be really hard. With the right community and the right skills and mindset, you can make a difference, and you're not alone. I think like just the feeling that you're not alone in this is really huge for a lot of people. And you can still have a positive attitude as you figure out like, what are the next steps I can take in supporting myself and supporting other women?
Absolutely. That's amazing. So, Amanda, you got so much going on, so many irons in the fire. I almost hesitate to ask, what's next for Nebraska Cures? What's on the horizon?
I know. Well, we're going to go into strategic planning this summer.
Oh, that's great.
So I'll know more later.
Yeah, okay.
End of our plan. But, we've really had to pivot kind of back into this support for basic science and helping people maybe better understand the value of investing in that. And in addition to that, just being super excited to see the results of this mental health study and what kind of maybe work groups. Like, I don't know exactly what it will look like yet, but it will probably be work groups and different and what impact can we make in those areas. And heck, we're already planning our next conference for women in STEM next year. We'll have a save the date coming out soon, and continuing to explore ways that we can support women, in that. So
that's great. That's great.
Going on.
Just a few things, So Amanda, let's talk a little bit more we've talked about funding of science, but you also right now it seems like busier than ever. When somebody donates to Nebraska Cures, because you are a 501c3 nonprofit, your efforts need to be funded as well. And I think we've already seen the outcome. I mean, your work and the organization's work in the legislature have helped protect that state funding, have helped with women in STEM with 3 successful years, have helped with this convening of the mental health efforts. And maybe I've just answered my own question, but my question is, what does the money go to when somebody donates?
Because we are small and lean, a lot of it goes towards advocacy.
Yeah.
Piece of it, or the tools needed to get there. And I haven't talked about this, but I do trainings on advocacy.
Oh, yeah.
If you want to learn more about what health or research related advocacy looks like I go into college classrooms, or we just had a Capital Day for Nebraska Women in STEM, where we took a couple dozen women down there to teach them about that, direct talking to their state senators, getting that. And so donations help support all of those efforts to educate people about advocacy, to educate them about the basics of policy around research and some of these public health areas. Or money can be put directly into sponsoring women in STEM or making more programming available.
That's fantastic. You know what? I'm going to tell you a personal story that's kind of related, kind of unrelated. On behalf of the marketing industry, I last year went to the day at the Dome to do some advocacy work. In the morning, I was so nervous because I'd never really done this type of work before, right? In the past, I've prepared messaging and prepared campaigns and handouts, but I've never been the one. Like when somebody said, okay, you're going to go up there and you're going to call a state senator off the floor. I'm like, well, I can't possibly do that. That's so rude. But I did, right? But I did it, and they came out and I did my thing. And so the first hour, I was so nervous. And by the second hour, I was like, who's next? This is really, once you realize, your public servants that you're talking to, they're just people and they need the information and they don't have the time to consume the internet or all of the volumes. And you going there as their constituent advocating for your position is what you're supposed to do. So I imagine your trainings help people not be nervous, but that was my experience, that I started being very nervous, ended going, okay, now I get this. And I think if more people tried it, they might have the same feeling oh, this is just me as a constituent, letting someone know what's important to me.
That was 100% the feedback we got from our group, is they just had no idea how easy and how legislators are. Yeah. So we went in without even an agenda. They could bring their own agenda from whatever sector of STEM they're in if they wanted, but it was primarily let's pull them off the floor so you can see how excited
what it's like. Yeah.
Less scary. And some of our trainings are virtual, just this is how a bill works through the Nebraska legislature. We have this unique unicameral, but all super valuable and hopefully increase engagement in the democratic process.
Yeah. So along those lines, Amanda, I'd love to hear your advice. So let's say somebody's out there that wants to make a difference in public health or maybe even another issue. What advice would you give someone?
Yeah, I'll give them the same advice I give myself every day.
I love it.
It's been challenging. It seems like there have been a lot of policy things coming up this year. I try to filter everything through the lens of where can I have the greatest impact today? What can I or can I not control? Because I think one mistake some advocates make is they go in thinking they're going to change the world overnight.
Yeah.
That is rare.
Yeah.
It is a long game of building relationships with elected officials. It is sometimes there are things that are just outside of your scope or ability to really impact. And so it's where even Nebraska Cures, we don't have all the resources.
Right.
I have to think about, okay, with my time, where is that best spent? often that is visiting directly with legislators as opposed to spending too much time just doing big public, or webinars or just out there and how can I best spend my time? And so thinking about that, I also, in a related way, ask people to think about what their expectations of their outcome is. Like, we need people getting involved. We need them writing their legislators.
Yeah.
But again, don't expect change to just happen suddenly or overnight, or that one conversation is going to change somebody. It is something where you have to be strategically persistent.
Yeah.
Don't necessarily write your legislator every day. That would impact.
Yeah, you don't want to be the one when your letter or email shows up that they're like, not another one.
Oh, there's Amanda again.
Yeah, not another one.
That's part of the communication piece too. Anyway, that was probably a longer answer.
I love it. Amanda, it occurs to me that it's important to manage expectations, but maybe even what you said, I think takes the pressure off a little bit too. Because sometimes, you feel like, oh, I got to write this letter or I got to go have this conversation and I'm responsible. Or on the flip side, you might think, oh, my one letter or one conversation won't do anything. But it's kind of the collective effect of a lot of small efforts, a lot of voices. And if everybody backs out and says, oh, I won't make any difference, or I can't move the needle, then nothing's going to happen either.
Nothing happens.
Yeah. So I appreciate that.
Like at a local level, you can have a more profound impact, in my opinion. We need to be calling our members of Congress, especially, with what's happening. But in a more normal year, I guess. It's at the local level, in your cities, at the state level, with your school boards, that bringing, well thought out ideas or solutions or problems to their attention can be really impactful.
Yeah.
But you also, especially if it is something where a lot of people are advocating, it really is just about sharing your opinion and one statistic or one value or something. You don't need to spend a whole day drafting that.
Okay. Good advice.
Yeah. Some people overthink it too.
Yeah. I can hear that. I can see that. Nerves will do that to a person. I think nerves will do that.
You think it has to be perfect. No, it doesn't have to be.
Yeah. So Amanda, for people who are listening who, want to support you and your efforts or learn more about women in STEM or all the things you're doing, how can they access more information and connect with you?
Yeah, head to nebraskacures.com. You'll find links to Nebraska Women in STEM there too. Information on medical research happening in Nebraska, as well as links to our efforts in mental health and women in STEM.
That's fantastic. We'll get all those links in the show notes on the KidGlov website as well. So Amanda, I'm going to switch gears and ask you my favorite question. I've asked this on every podcast. We're coming up on 250 now. And that is, I would like an Amanda McGill Johnson original quote to inspire our listeners. Putting you on the hot seat here.
Yeah, and I kind of already said it to a certain extent. But, really think about what you can and cannot control. Yeah. And focus in on the areas that you feel you can have the greatest impact. It is easy to burn out, and be pulled in a lot of different directions. But for me, that has really become a North Star, like figuring out where can I have the greatest impact today and not put too much expectation on myself either. Right. Just where
I love it.
Focus.
I think that brings us full circle again. We've kind of completed a couple different loops here today, but I think that's a mental health issue too, right? Like I can make a difference. I can't make all the difference, but I can make a difference if I really focus on that. So great advice.
And Amanda, it's planting a seed that will grow down the road, or when other people water it, all the things.
I love it. I love it. I love it. Amanda, this has been such a great and energizing conversation. As we wrap up our time here today, what is the most important thing you would like people to remember about the work that you're doing?
Yeah. Oh, that's a big one. Just that we can't take science and advancement for granted. We have for so long, but we can't take it for granted anymore. We need to talk about the importance of science and progressing as a human society, right?
Yeah.
But also just as an economic driver. It's both of those things. So don't take it for granted. advocate for it, encourage your kids to go into those career fields too, because it really is the future.
That's amazing. What great inspiration there, Amanda. Amanda, I'm going to say I fully believe the world needs more people like you, more organizations doing the good work like Nebraska Cures. And I appreciate you taking time out of your very, very busy schedule to talk with us today.
Thanks for having me, Lynn. This was delightful.
We hope you enjoyed today's Agency for Change podcast. To hear all our interviews with those who are making a positive change in our communities, or to nominate a changemaker you'd love to hear from, visit KidGlov.com at KidGlov.com to get in touch. As always, if you like what you've heard today, be sure to rate, review, subscribe, and share. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.